The following program is a presentation of Mount Zion Media Ministries.
And the subject of the sermon today is one that I want you to take personal. The one thing I want most. And it's not the one thing that Daniel Simmons wants most, but hopefully it is the one thing that you want most. Let's just suppose that you were just walking around one day and you found the genie lamp. You know, I dream of genie. And the genie came out and said, you can have one wish, not three, but one. If you really searched your heart, what do you think that wish would be? If you are sick, would it be for health? If you are poor or greedy, would it be for wealth? If you were single, would it be for a companion? If you were in trouble, would it be for deliverance from your trouble? If you were not satisfied with the way you look, would it be for divine cosmetic surgery? On a very serious note, search your heart and ask yourself, what would it be? And maybe to help get you to the point where you can really be fair with yourself and with God, just ask yourself, what is it that you plead for the most in your prayers? What is it that you come to church with on your mind? And when you come to the altar and when you are seated in your seat, what is that one thing that dominates your mind and your thoughts? And while you ponder that, let me share with you what David discovered and what I hope all of us will leave here with today. As I told you on last Sunday when we began preaching in this 27th Psalm, this psalm comes out of a period in David's life when David is being persecuted, David is being troubled. And he refers to his enemies first as numerous. So David doesn't have one person pursuing him, but there are many. And then David uses graphic language in verse 2 to describe how vicious and evil his enemies are. He says, when the wicked, even my enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, viciousness, evil is all around him. And as a part of David's turmoil, David's difficulty, David is caught in that place where he has to decide now what is most important in his life. And after deciding what is important, David has to come to a point where he understands how to get what it is that he wants. And can I tell you that when you read the psalm, what is clear is that David is a realist. He hadn't put his head in the sand about his troubles, about his enemies, but throughout the psalm, he clearly articulates the power of his enemies, the potential power that his enemies has over him to destroy him. Yet, David is not preoccupied with the enemy because he's discovered how to find deliverance from his enemies. In the first three verses, and I won't re-preach last Sunday's sermon, but he gives us the reason for his hope. God is his light, God is his salvation, and God is his strength. And in these three verses today, David tells us about the place where he can find help, and we can find help in the same place. because of David's trouble, he was forbidden from going to Jerusalem. And that posed a problem for him because in this Old Testament dispensation, the belief was that God dwelt in the tabernacle. This was before the temple had been built. And so God had instructed David, along with all the children of Israel, to erect a tent. And that tent was called the tabernacle or the temple. Tabernacle meaning temporary house. And they would gather in that temporary place to worship God. But because David was on the run from his enemies, David could not go to worship. And what David shares with us in verse 4 is his longing to be in the house of worship. David prioritizes for us the main thing in his life. He says, this one thing, the one thing that I have desired from the Lord, not the only thing, but the thing that is above every other thing. Not my only desire, but the desire that is above every other desire. That one thing, the most important thing, is that I can dwell in the house of the Lord. I want to be in the house of the Lord. David says, I want to be where he is. I ask myself, why is David so caught up in being at the house of the Lord? Because I know plenty of folk don't care much about the house of the Lord. They go when they feel like it. And especially if they're in trouble like David is in trouble, you know, they may just hang out. Can I tell you, I did a little studying of David, and what I discovered was David was a worshiper. And if you are a worshiper, then you have a longing to be in the house where you can worship the object of your worship. And I know we're on a different day and we understand that God is everywhere, but just bear with me for a minute. David wanted to be in the place where he could worship the Lord. And can I tell you, if you really want to move to a place where you can deal with the difficulties of life, become a worshiper. Become a person who abides in the presence of God, because that's all worship is about, coming into God's presence. And when you become a worshiper, you discover the secret to your deliverance, to your steadfastness. Let's follow David, because what I want you to see first is that David shows us how to get into true worship. I'm going to make it real plain for you today. Look again at verse 4. David said, one thing have I desired of the Lord, that I shall seek, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. And that's where he talks about his desire to be there to worship. But what is worship about? He says, to behold the beauty of the Lord.